Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Train for That podcast. I'm here with the one, the only Shane Farmer.
Hey.
Shane Farmer, he and I go way back to a time where we were both fitnessing really hard, and his area of specialty in fitnessing was rowing.
Yeah.
You can't tell with him sitting down, but when he stands up,
Average
he's
Joe.
like 7'7", and his quads blow out the roof. 7'8". It was way up. Just
like
keep pointing up.
8.5 feet, something like that.
How long ago was that, Shane? That was
Well,
2000.
peak for us was, I don't know, 2012?
Yeah, 2012 or
Somewhere in
2012.
2012 to 2014, so probably somewhere in there.
10 years. 10 years
Yeah,
ago.
long time.
And you did the fitnessing, and then you also kind of realized that there was kind of this giant void in fitnessing of somebody who taught quality rowing.
Yeah.
And that is now what you do. So why don't you explain a little bit about Dark Horse Rowing, kind of what you do there, and kind of how it all started. I'm curious myself.
So, yeah, I rowed in college. That was how I found rowing. That was my first experience to it. But simultaneously, you probably know the name Stefan Roche. So Stefan Roche was my strength training coach in college.
Stefan Roche, by the way, when you look at it on paper, it looks like it's spelled Stephanie Rocket. And he actually is. How tall is Stefan?
But he is the most badass Stephanie Rocket you'll ever meet.
Absolutely. And he's like 6'6".
Yeah, he is a
military background.
Yeah, he was like LA SWAT.
Yeah.
Bald, sweetest man you'll ever meet when it's time to be sweet. And he will melt your world if you are not following along with the program.
I got scheduled with him on a seminar, and I looked at the list, and it said Stephanie Rocket. And I was like, okay, Stephanie Rocket. And he walks in, and I'm like, this is Stephanie Rocket. Oh, my. And it was, so it caught me off guard. Since then, he's always
Patricia
been Stephanie.
Barber.
Yeah, I'll be Patricia Barber for me from now on. Anyway, so Stephanie Roche.
Yeah, so Stephanie Rocket was my my strength training coach in college. And he converted our S&C gym at USD, where I went to school, to a CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
And this is in 2006, like early days.
Yeah.
So nobody was really, there were few CrossFit gyms around, and our college just happened to be one of them because of him. And so we were exposed to CrossFit at a very early stage, which was my sophomore year. Yeah. And so we fell in love with it, and we credited it to our success and why we went to the national championships and had like an amazing 4 years there was because of his coaching. Right. So I have a fondness in my heart for him because he really set me down the track that I've ended up on. Post-college, I wasn't tall enough or heavy enough to go into the elite rowing world, and so I went and got a job.
How tall and heavy are you, by the way?
I'm 6'3", 190.
Right.
I was 170 in college, though.
Nice.
CrossFit put about 20 pounds on me.
There we go.
I never cracked 200.
Okay.
But
one day you can get there.
Yeah, elite rowers, you should be about 6'6" and 220. Yeah. So I was a few inches off and about 40 pounds too light at the time. So left college, went and got a job with a suit and a tie selling life insurance. Hated my life. But just happened to walk past a CrossFit gym at the time, and I was desperately missing being an athlete. And that gym just happened to be CrossFit Invictus.
Right.
And I poked my head in, and they were 3-4 months old at that time. Yeah. And I was like, hey, I think this is a CrossFit gym in the real world. I've only ever seen my college gym. Right. And so I went, and I ended up becoming a member there. And very quickly started competing because I was missing the world of competition. Yeah. So started training for sectionals in 2010, and then quickly realized, nobody here knows how to row. Like rowing machines everywhere, but nobody gets it, and nobody's teaching. Like there's everybody's focusing on everything else. And like every time somebody jumps on this machine,
you got it.
It's rough, and so. I was selling life insurance. I hated my life, and I quit with no plan. And so I was like, well, maybe I could teach rowing at the gym here as like a stopgap. And then started coaching and really quickly fell in love with coaching. I think thankfully to CJ Martin at the time, who was kind of my mentor back in those days. So I started coaching rowing, started coaching CrossFit, started competing in CrossFit. Was lucky enough to be on the Invictus team 2010, 11, 12 and 13 at the games, and then just started coaching more and more. I met my now wife, and she invited me on a trip to Europe after we'd known each other for like 3 months. I was like, yeah, what could go wrong? But I also didn't have any money, so I had to figure out how to pay for it. So I wrote up a 1-page PDF that was a sales sheet for a rowing seminar and emailed it to every CrossFit gym I could find in Europe at the time, which was like 10.
Yeah.
And I got picked up by a gym in Le Mans, Switzerland, CrossFit Le Mans. Yeah. And they brought me. That was my very first seminar. After I got back from that trip, Concept 2 had heard about it. There was a message waiting for me at Invictus, and the head coaching spot for CrossFit rowing was open, and they offered it to me because nobody else was coaching rowing then.
Yeah.
So I started kind of had a baton handoff from the then coach to myself and one other to start leading the CrossFit rowing seminars, and that kind of kicked off like my, the real career, I guess, as I know it now. And then along that process, just realized how many more people I wanted to be able to reach, but I couldn't do it if I was just doing seminars. And so I had to figure out a way to take those things online. And that was kind of the impetus for the beginning of Dark Horse. And Dark Horse now is entirely online. We've never had a physical presence. And we've stumbled our way into being the world's largest rowing YouTube channel. And we have membership programs, and, we help start rowing clubs with other companies, and so we have corporate contracts, and we're kind of all over the place now, but it all revolves around teaching rowing.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
It sounds like...
That was long-winded. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. I mean, that's what we want to hear. I think that's really profoundly interesting. I mean, it sounded like... you mentioned a few times you hated your life selling life insurance, and I'm sure it wasn't necessarily the fact that you were selling life insurance. It was more just the general... That wasn't what you wanted to do.
Right. It didn't connect with me.
Right.
I still have my insurance with Northwestern Mutual. I was selling insurance.
Right,
I believe in the product.
Yeah.
But I think what I realized is that discussing everybody else's impending doom day in and day out was like not calling to my soul.
Right.
And it just was slowly eating away at me.
Right.
And there are lots of people who thrive in that environment, and to them there's a connection. For me, it was almost heartbreaking to be having those conversations every day.
Yeah.
And so I just found myself like withering away every day. So yeah, it wasn't the company, it wasn't the product. It was just a poor match for my personality and what I was doing.
And so it sounds like you made a series of I don't know, I feel very akin to your upbringing with just there's these things that are you're just getting lucky.
Yeah.
And then when someone offers something to you, instead of being well, I don't think you just say yes. And you're yeah, okay, fine, sure.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. And then somewhere down the road, you're all these decisions I made, I'm in a really good place right now. And and it was purely just saying yes a number of times to get you where you're at. But
absolutely.
And getting super lucky. It sounds like you work your butt off when you get the opportunity.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the way you set that up, I was man, I feel like I had the same story, just multiple times where someone's yeah, no one's doing this. You want to do it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
That sounds about right. Yeah. And then, now I'm the biggest in the world at it. That's awesome. In the very beginning, you were talking about your row team benefiting from doing CrossFit, benefiting from doing more than just rowing. And I think that's something we try to speak to in a lot of the daily training. Basically saying the idea of training is to make you better at everything else that you do.
Right.
But what's interesting to me is when you break that down to a very specialized sport, say rowing, there's very specific demands for rowing. And you would think that a strength and conditioning coach who's just focusing for rowing would understand would have a very clever way of going about getting someone better at rowing. But it sounds like you were doing just a generalized training program as well as, probably sports specific stuff. But what do you think it is that that the other teams wouldn't do? Because you say you attributed a lot of your successes to that. So what was different about that compared to what was going on at the time?
I believe there was a really healthy level of, and this from CrossFit, of the grit factor, of just the willingness to dig and search and find and commit yourself to something. Do I think that the movements that were chosen and because we were, at the time, we were still doing main site wads.
Yeah.
Like
For
if
sure.
you go search my name on main site wad, there's a post for me asking about rhabdo, because I definitely gave myself rhabdo back in the day, like before anybody knew what it was.
Yeah.
So
What was the workout? Do you remember?
yeah, it was
So for those of you listening, rhabdomyolysis is such severe muscle tissue breakdown that you can flood your kidneys with muscle tissue and die of kidney failure. And essentially, it doesn't always go to that extreme, but it happens when you have like really aggressive breakdown. Like you do way more than you should.
Yeah.
And it happens a lot of time with eccentric loading, so jumping slow negatives and pull-ups. It happens with GHD sit-ups, where you're slowly falling against gravity and resisting it. It happens with progressive scaling. So jumping pull-ups are a double whammy, because as you can slowly lower less, you fall faster, but you still jump past the front end. So jumping pull-ups are a recipe for it. Super high volume, or really good athletes who don't train for a while and then come back and hit it really hard. But it's something that happens also in crush victims. So if somebody gets like smashed really fast and there's a bunch of muscle tissue that floods, it can cause issues. But it can happen through aggressive fitness. And it sounds like, what was the one that did it to you?
It was Murph.
It was Murph. There we go.
It
Classic.
was the pull-ups.
Yeah.
It was the pull-ups, because I didn't have any foundation for high repetition or high volume pull-ups at the time. We were good at pulling because we're rowers.
For
like
sure.
We have zero press strength. Like, don't ask any of us to bench press
So
or
it
do
may have been the
push-ups.
push-ups too.
Yeah.
The combo.
It could have been. Yeah. Pulling we can do all day long, but yeah, I mean, I did 100 strict, with like definitely some jumps to the top.
Cool.
And yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah. So it was, I think it was my 4th CrossFit workout ever.
Yeah.
And I think I did it right before, I don't remember. It was like maybe my 4th named workout or something like that.
And you were already an athlete, so you're like, yeah, I'm going to go.
Yeah, I'm going to crush this. and I was in a summer study abroad class, so I did the workout. And what happened to me was I essentially swelled like a sausage from my wrist to my shoulder on both arms.
Yeah.
And I couldn't extend nor bend my arm past. I mean, I had like 10 degrees range of motion in both arms. And I had to get on a plane and fly to Europe for a study abroad.
Compartment syndrome status.
Oh yeah, it was rough. And I mean, I'm probably lucky that nothing worse happened.
Totally.
Because I don't think I reached terminal extension of my arm for like probably the 3rd week into being on that summer study abroad trip.
So here's my theory. I think there's something that's
Which is where the post on the main site came from. Because I was in Europe like, somebody please help me understand what is happening right now.
Well, but here's what I think is like, you were used to handling intensity because you row. Like, and there's a grit required for that. And there's like this, so you understood intensity, you were kind of inoculated to that, but just the volume of that specific movement messed you up. Because true rhabdo is full body soreness. Like your whole body shuts down. You're peeing Coca-Cola. Like there's a lot going on. Yeah. But I've had a similar thing, even when I was like really inoculated to it, when I did, 300 pull-ups and all unbroken sets, like 70 at a time during one workout. And it was the same sort of deal. Just the arms swelled up.
Yeah.
So it's like people call it like localized rhabdo, but I think it's like when people have inoculation to like the ability to flush CPK count, like the CPK levels in your body, and that you can actually just localize damage something so much because you haven't done that you end up like messed up for a while. Like, but it's that brutal. Anyway, so you make this post. So you're saying that like grit was one of the things that you think.
Yeah. So do I think that any one movement like credits us with our performance? I don't think so. Right. But I think it was the level of intensity, the willingness to think outside of traditional S&C boxes that many strength and conditioning coaches like stuck to, because we had been through a prior strength and conditioning coach, and he just wrote like half-ass programs.
Right.
Like he didn't really care or invest in us. And when Stefan showed up, he really cared about us. Like he really cared about every sport. And if you invested in your time in the weight room, he would reward that with his investment into you. Like he wanted to see you succeed. And so I think there was maybe something to like us placing a lot of our efforts and our focus into the weight room, because we knew and we trusted that we had a coach that really cared about us. And so whatever he programmed, we would do.
Right.
And it's funny, I've never actually stopped to think like, well, what was it about our training that we thought lent to our success through rowing? I think it was probably an amalgamation of different factors. We had an amazing group of guys. We all started together. We saw success early on. We stuck together for 4 years. We instituted extra work. we would all stay around during the summers, and we would become members of the local rowing club, and we would go row with the local rowing club during our summers, 5 a.m. So we'd go row for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. We'd all immediately leave, go straight up to the strength and conditioning room, work out with Stefan for an hour and a half, and then we would all go to work, take our classes, do things like that, all summer long for 2 years. So when we would come back and the season would start, we were fitter than any other team out there.
Totally.
So I think there's like some level to the group that we had, the way that we started, the way that we went through. Our head coach at the time was very lacking as a coach, and so I think we really leaned into Stefan as like a role model for us.
Yeah.
So the weight room kind of became like our haven, as opposed to leaning into our coach, because he was kind of a nothing burger. Yeah. So.
Well, it's cool that you guys had a mentor that you could put your faith into, and who supported it, who rewarded it back with kind of like the effort into you. Yeah. The thing that I always go to with success in other sports from a generalized program is just balance. Yeah. And that was something that, I was curious if you'd speak to, just because like I feel like a lot of the times when we get sports specific, we end up lacking balance just because it's all focused on the one thing. Like you said, rowing's all pulling. Yes. And so you tend to train mainly pulling, right? Especially if you're just looking at it in a bubble or like like through a single lens. Whereas if you look at the bigger picture of fitness, there's more than just pulling. Yeah. So, and who knows why making you better at pushing gets you stronger at rowing, but like, cool. Like I think that was always the thing that people spoke to, and I was curious if you thought maybe that helped a little.
It absolutely did. And now, like as a coach, I have had the wonderful pleasure of being able to write a strength program for a former teammate of mine. Nice. He was in the national program, in the national team program, and had been under a coach who was he was destroying them with volume. Yeah. Just as old school gets, rowing coach, just as many meters as he could get those guys to slog he was doing. And my buddy was pulling, this may or may not mean something to you listening, or even to you, Pat, but he was pulling, his fastest was about a 5:52 2K. Oh, wow. Which is screaming fast. I mean, but by no means the fastest in the world. Fastest in the world's like a 5:36.
But when you're 20 seconds off the fastest in the world, right? Like that's
so he's pulling a 5:52, and all this volume, his time starts climbing 5:53, 5:54, 5:55, and he can't seem to gain it back. And his coach's solution is, well, you need to row more clearly. And I just happened to, my buddy was getting really frustrated because he kind of felt like he was drowning in the program, and he sent me a video of him rowing one day at I think it was national selection regatta, which is like trials to make it to the Olympic team. And I just watched him, and I'd been coaching for a while at this point, and I was just able to see the deficiencies in the way his body was moving through the stroke, that if I had just been a rowing coach, probably would have bypassed my eye. But having been a strength and conditioning coach now, CrossFit, and he spent plenty of time working under every single Bergner and Carl Pally and Kelly Strutt and all these amazing coaches, was able to see like there was a lot of slippage happening through the transfer in his midline. And so I wrote him a strength and conditioning program that was intended to balance out everything that he was doing. Right. And it was essentially, it was all the counterbalance points to the things that we see in rowing. So it was very little pulling. Right. It was push to the point of balance, just to establish better strength in the push, but doing a lot of dynamic hip opening, doing a lot of front rack loading, especially with sandbags and carries and things like that, to help establish that midline ability to maintain in an upright position over prolonged periods of time. So I had him doing lots of sandbag long walks, things like that. So I had a lot of fun in being able to program a balance to that. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
Well, so how did his time go?
Oh, so we got him down to 5:50. 5:50.0.
That's so rad.
He missed getting to 5:40, breaking 5:50 by 0.1 seconds, which is like the heartbreak of his career. But we got him, down to 5:50 from incredible. His fastest time had been 5:52. So it was successful. And I'm not saying that was all me, because he switched coaches. He moved to another coach who was able to prioritize, shorter, more intense forms. But he stayed with that strength program and in conjunction with. So it was a lot of fun to program. And to answer your question, balance goes a long way there.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I mean, those numbers are staggering. Like that's like when you look at that, to me, I'm like, nah, never.
Nope,
nah,
never.
I'm just gonna go ahead and you can just tap out of that one. You guys can have it. You win there. If you haven't rode a 2K and like really put everything on the line to do so, the next time you get a chance to on a rower, warm up and set your time and like go for broke. And then compare that to what he just said time wise, a 550. 550.0. It's that is a screaming time.
Yeah.
So that's
he's
incredible.
6'6", 220.
Still,
he's that like size. So
right.
Also keep that in mind. Don't be too hard on yourself.
Wait, so you're saying my 5'7", 178-ish is not the ideal rowing?
You could.
Height?
I mean, up in weight if you wanted to.
I could up my weight. I can't up my height. Okay, all right. So you're saying I need to gain like a hundo? Like, hey, we'll get after this.
Really start
I'll be
leaning 280,
on it. 280, 5'7". See how my rowing goes.
Right.
Mass moves mass. Right. Let's do a full on kind of pivot. So you are now a father twice over.
Oh man, am I?
You've got 2 girls.
A girl and a boy.
Girl and a boy. Okay,
Yeah.
Girl and a boy.
Yep.
A 4-year-old and a 17-month-old.
Yeah.
And now you're running businesses, Dark Horse Rowing, and you are, by the way, you made rowing cool. Like,
thanks, man.
Dark Horse Rowing, like, that's incredible. Like, it made me want to row. Like, I saw your name for it. I'm like, wow, I've never wanted to row before. And then I saw like all your stuff and I was like, okay, I get it. I'll
be honest, like that was one of my original tenets of what I was trying to accomplish. Like rowing wasn't cool. Like people hated it, and they still do, to be fair.
Of course.
But like I wanted to take the like stigma out of it.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah. And you did. And like
Thanks,
everything you deliver is that way. And what I find, I mean, before we get into the kids, what I find truly fascinating is like rowing is, it's like anything else. Like that you can look at it really broadly and be like, okay, that's it. There's like one thing, you just do the thing, or you can break it down really granularly and look at each little component of it and refine those components to where it becomes a much more enjoyable process.
Yeah.
To where you're using the least amount of energy to get the most work done.
Right.
And you end up way faster, way more efficient, and can get a lot more from your workout. So it's like to put time into rowing is very beneficial, just like anything else. But there was that stigma around it, like just like
this is my monostructural piece.
I get in there and I just get it done. I get out of the way. But it's like you made rowing cool, man. Like it was a good job. I'm very impressed with that. So you've got these business, and you've got these kids now, and you've got the wife, and you've got a little homestead even like down on your little place. You're doing the whole thing. That's awesome.
That's what you and I have like been reconnecting on lately.
I know. We found each other later in life after having no responsibility to all the responsibility.
Yes, all of them.
Yeah, all of them. And speaking of balance, it's like, how do you find so you just competed in a regalia? Is that what they call it? Regatta.
Yeah, like sailing and rowing, the events are regattas.
Yeah. And how'd you guys do?
We won.
And you won.
And we won.
And so what does that training look like as an adult who has all these things, who has this stuff going on? You have a background in it, but at the same time, you need to balance everything else.
Yep.
And then go out and win a regatta. Like what does that process look like?
It looks like training as much as my schedule will allow.
Okay.
When
and
it
what is that
allows
training?
It. So I did I think I made it 9 weeks through a 12-week cycle. I found that with kids, very rarely am I able to fully complete any cycle that I commit to.
Right.
Inevitably, at some point, the kids get sick, I get sick, like the wheels fall off.
Right.
And the cycle doesn't complete. So I try to make it as far as I can through cycles. But I did a 9-week unilateral leg strength program.
Okay.
Where it was basically Bulgarian split squats, Bulgarian deadlifts, and hip thrusts as the priority movements for 9 weeks, coupled with the ATG programming.
Yeah.
So I was doing ATG plus unilateral leg strength, primarily, hardly doing any aerobic work.
Yeah.
Zero CrossFit, zero like functional training. I was just trying to
get your
grow my butt.
Back. Yeah. Get that legs and butt.
Yeah, because I've always had a really small, really weak butt, and I was like, well, I might as well just try and focus on probably the weakest point of my entire system, which is my butt. Like,
which just out of just I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I think that not devil's advocate, but I'm just going to put it into context. For an athlete who has come as far as you have, I think you have the luxury of spending the time
that's true.
focusing on one thing. And I think too many people jump in first off and they go, I need to focus on this one thing or get this one thing. I'm like, you don't have that luxury. You don't have the luxury of having a giant foundation to be like, this is the one thing that's weak. Let me focus here. Like that's you don't
true.
get that right. It's the same thing as like your rower buddy. You can't just be like, all you get to do is like the sandbag carries. It's like, no, like most people have nothing. Like most people, and so they don't have the luxury of working on the one thing.
Right.
So it's really cool, but I just wanted to make sure that like someone listening doesn't go, well, that's what I need. I just need the butt program. And I'm like, no.
There's the magic ticket.
Here's the deal. He's also has this huge history of being really fit with every other thing. And now he can be like, I'm going to take the time to just work on this.
And I think, that's an excellent point because I guess I decided that because I've spent so much time doing everything else that I know where my deficiencies are to like a hyper focused point.
Exactly.
I know, I've had back issues in the past and I believe I understand why they happen.
Right.
And I believe that's the big part, like due to my weak glutes. And I know that historically I don't have any back issues training when it's unilateral strength.
Yeah.
Right. When I can isolate a leg,
Some good data.
I can save myself from that stress, and the less I can put a barbell on my shoulders, the more strength I can develop, the faster I can do it, and the safer I can do it.
Yeah.
And so I was like hunting that program, trying to find it for a long time. So I was happy when I did. But yeah, I guess I had the luxury of doing it because I've tested every other area. I have done so many different programs throughout the years. I've run from gymnastic bodies to I can't even think of everything now. But
to Oli programs, to squatting programs, to like everything.
100%.
CrossFit programs, competitor programs, volume programs.
You name it, we've all tested it.
For sure.
And so,
But that experimentation is super important, and especially if you're looking to like perform as an individual athlete, like getting that big broad base. So you spend this time getting that gadunk.
Yeah. So, I was growing the peach.
But not clearly not for looks. It was more for...
a little bit of both.
Well, fair.
I mean, half of it was for my wife, half of it was for me.
For me. She likes the performance though, so that's what she was for. The looks was just for Shane.
So I did that. That was kind of the foundation that I laid for it, knowing that this race was coming up. But I was like, for me, aerobic has always come easily.
Yeah.
So I know that all I need is like a month, and I can get that aerobic up.
Right.
So about 3 months prior, we started rowing once a week together, actually showing up onto the water, doing water trainings. But in our boat of 8, 6 of us have kids, multiple kids under the age of 5.
Solid.
So trying to organize a group of 8 guys to show up at 5 a.m. on a Friday
Solid.
consistently is tough.
Very.
But we got decent enough practices in. And from there, 5 weeks out, I signed up for a tour to Zwift. I used Zwift, the like cycling video game.
Oh, interesting.
And I connected it to my bike erg.
Yeah.
And I did a 5-stage cycling tour.
Awesome.
Cycling tour. And like put myself in categories that would push me to like, because I cycled way back in college as my cross training, but I don't have a cycling base. So I was like, well, let me do something that will aerobically really stress test me.
Yeah.
And so I did this 5-stage tour, which was brutal, but I mean, I credit it with really like getting me up to speed with the way that I needed to. I started throwing in about 1 to 2 erg workouts a week, getting sport specific. There's this test called the Rugby Test, and that was like what we as a team kind of used as our base to test how we were doing. And that is you want a rough one? I'm going to put this out there for all of you listening. This is a good test on the erg, and it's a fun one. It's 1,000 meters, 3-minute rest, 750 meters, 2.5 minute rest, 500 meters, 2 minute rest, 250 meters, 2 minute rest, 750 meters.
Oh, go back up.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That sounds horrible.
And it's a baseline establishment test for the 2K. So your average split over those 5 pieces is generally a pretty close testament to what you'll be able to do on a 2K. So you put in, more than 2,000 meters in volume, but you end up with about the same split.
Right.
So we were using that once a week, and then I was putting in another one, and then the week beforehand, before the regatta, I was putting in some like high rating pieces, trying to get my rate up to like 36, 38 strokes a minute, because that's kind of what you hold in an actual rowing race.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And then you did that all the way up until
This weekend.
this week.
This last weekend.
And then this last weekend you did
How
how long is the race? 2K?
2K. Straight shot.
What was your time?
We pulled a 6:38.
Fantastic.
Won by 16 seconds.
That's a solid.
Yeah.
That's a solid margin.
Yeah, it wasn't a small victory, which was like I think a big testament to A, the team that we had, and B, just the training that everybody put in.
Yeah.
Everybody took it really seriously. It was a lot of fun to show up and have what was a truly beautiful race get executed.
Rad.
Because it's been so long, through COVID, all the races were canceled. Just like everybody's events were canceled for the last 2 years. So to have that be our first race back was really rewarding for everyone.
Yeah. That's rad, man.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've kind of done what you wanted to do with Dark Horse Rowing. And not it's done. I'm not saying it's done. I'm just saying you made rowing cool. So like, what's the next step for Dark Horse? Like in your mind, what do you want to accomplish world takeover wise?
That's a great question. So I love coaching coaches, and so we also have a course it's the Concept 2 trainers course. So we can actually train up coaches on the Concept 2 machine to go and teach their athletes. That was one of our original products, and kind of through how the world has turned and moved, our membership program has become kind of a bigger part of our business. So I'd like to revive that and bring that back to start having a larger impact, because I know that for every coach I teach, I can have an impact on 1,000 people.
Yeah.
So I'd like to kind of run that one up the flag again. I'm loving what I'm getting to do right now in go have high level conversations with different rowing machine companies that are coming out and looking for advisorship on how to try and bring it to the market, because that's kind of what we understand best. Is like that segment of the market, the non-rower. They don't identify as a rower, but they want to use a rowing machine as a training tool. That's who we really, really speak to. So helping to kind of guide into that space of the market. So from, investment to advising to where I get to move to this level of having as broad of an impact as I can possibly have on more lives, more people. I'm having some really cool opportunities with race commentating. So I've been commentating with World Rowing the past 3 years, doing the World Championships, which has been really amazing to be able to do. So, man, I'm just lucky. Like my whole life gets to revolve around something I'm incredibly passionate about. And
you're still passionate about rowing.
Yeah. And I think
awesome.
The thing, like you said, you just kind of keep saying yes to the opportunities that come up. And I'm a firm believer that what you can control is your process, but you don't have control of your outcome. And so if you set your North Star and just kind of, you just keep saying yes to the right opportunities and just keep moving, adjusting the process as you go. You can't really decide what your outcome is going to be, but you'll have some semblance of what the original idea was. So I don't ever really place a whole lot in I don't 5-year plan, because I could, establish a relationship tomorrow that will change that entire trajectory, but it's all in the same vein. So I guess, I don't know what the next step is, but I do know that it'll just keep moving in this direction.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like you're just open to whatever kind of pops up, but at the same time, you're heading in the direction of just helping more people. Through the avenue of row at this point in time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think just why don't you leave us with what the number one best rower on the market is? Don't tell. Just drop the name. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm completely joking on that one. Wait, before we go? What's the last thing that you would say? Because I think there's a lot of great things on the market. That's beside the point. What would you say is the number one thing you see deficiency wise in the everyday rower who has the T-shirt that says, "I don't identify as a rower, but I row."
But I row.
What's the one thing that, if you like, the piece of advice that they could sit down and think about and be like, what am I doing? Without taking your Suck Less at Rowing course, which we're going to put out.
Yeah.
You guys look for that in our ecosystem. But without doing that, what's the one thing that the next time they hop on, they could just think about and be like, okay, Shane says this. He sees this all the time. Let me see if I'm doing this.
I'm gonna take two on this one.
Do it.
Purely technical perspective. Focus on ensuring that the way you move on the machine is rooted in being a push rather than a pull. So if you can think about the way that you move and apply your force to the machine, if you can think about the way that you move your body and that you're always trying to push on the machine rather than trying to pull the handle to your body, you can make that paradigm shift.
Okay.
It goes a long ways.
Okay.
Because even a simple paradigm shift can change from when you think pull, typically you think about pulling with the arms.
Yeah.
But the rowing stroke is rooted in a push through the legs.
Right.
And so if I can get you to make that paradigm shift to, oh, got it, I got to get my legs like pushed into the machine,
Gotcha.
you can make pretty impactful change when that lands.
Right.
That, it can land immediately. You can hear that and you'd be like, light bulb.
Yeah.
Or it may take you a bunch of practice and, a month from now you're like, oh, got it. There it is.
Pull.
Push,
There it
not
is.
pull. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's sitting seated in their heads now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So plant that seed.
Push,
and then
not
number
pull.
2 is, and this may sound cheesy, but like coming back to that, the reason I think rowing has been so impactful for me is, and why I chose the name Dark Horse behind the business is like that idiom of a dark horse, that person who isn't expected to win, who doesn't have all the resources in the world, who isn't, an incredible athlete from day one, but makes the decision that they want to change their lives using a tool, can absolutely do it. Again, just by start with your process, start with the things that you choose to do day in and day out. And so if you've chosen the rower as that tool, just focus on being the best version of yourself that you can be and continue to chip away at the process of that machine, because eventually you will get to where you want to go. Yeah. You just have to keep guiding that North Star. And so I really like to try and instill that, embody that idiom of a dark horse, because it goes a long ways in your life once you really believe that about yourself. And I think not enough people in this world have that support system around them, where if they know that they have to change, or know that they want to change something about themselves, or they're wherever they are, if you can embody that, you realize it's all within your control.
Yeah.
And it's only up to you. Nobody else can do it for you. Yeah. You have to make that shift yourself. But when you do, and you know that other people out there will support you and are doing the same thing, there are tons of other rowers in the world. Once you find them, you're like, oh man, my people.
Yeah.
There are others that feel that way and will support you in your efforts. So I just cheer you on, be that person, embody that, own that idiom.
Yeah. I think a rower is a fantastic avenue to that.
Yeah.
There's a certain grit required for it, and pushing through it helps you be the person that just kind of comes through, and even unexpected does that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even know that's why you chose Dark Horse. Thanks for leaving it on that.
Yeah.
Shane, I really appreciate you coming. Don't want to take up your entire evening. I know you got to go eat right now. Yeah, you're looking all fancy with your clothes there. This is my dinner attire. So thank you so much for coming, Shane, and look for his amazing course that he's going to put out there, the Suck Less at Rowing course, through everything that we have here.
Hopefully, truly, it helps you suck less.
Yeah. Hopefully, truly. All right. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Pat.